Like a craftsman with their tools, we all have something to offer. We have been designed with a purpose and have opportunities to influence, encourage, and inspire those around us. And simply put, it comes down to identifying the answer to one question: what is in your hand? We believe the answer to this question lies in how God designed us and what He designed us for. If you have a desire to love and lead those around you, you won't want to miss the Move Out Gathering. We have Dave Nelson, lead pastor of K2 The Church in Salt Lake City.
What God is trying to help all of us understand, it's not about the job that we're doing, it's about the essence of who He's created us to be.
We have the privilege of hearing from Brian Peterson, a designer from Kia who started a nonprofit for the homeless of Southern California.
Usually, as we paint people, they go from like fans to friends, and then some become like family.
And Danielle Strickland, author, speaker, and co-founder of 4 organizations.
Love is a means by which you can unlock the kind of servanthood that has no agenda, which is so powerful.
There will also be several workshops to choose from. You are an influencer. You have relationships. You have an opportunity to discover not only how you were crafted, but what you were crafted for.
Well, good morning. We hope that you will come be a part of the Move Out Gathering with us here at the end of January. We believe that each and every single one of you is a person of influence and that you are a leader. And throughout this 2-day event, we'll be discovering how God has crafted you for a specific purpose. And when we start to realize what that is and to live that out, that will change how we lead in our lives, in our homes, in our workplaces, in our communities, and even here at church. So we'd love for you to come be a part of that. You can go online to register for the Move Out Gathering. Well, my name is Shauna, and I'm the production manager here at Clinton Township, and I just want to say welcome. We are so glad that you have joined us here today. If it is your first time, I would like to say a special welcome to you and to invite you to stop by the Hub after service. We have a special gift that is just for you. The Hub is located in the center of the lobby. There's some signs above it that say the Hub, and you'll see some people wearing some orange shirts. And that really is a place for you to be able to discover more about Kensington. You can ask questions, find out information, and it's a place for you to be able to connect to the community here at Kensington. Now, speaking of connection, today after service is our Connect event. So out in the lobby, there are a bunch of tables of all the different types of groups and courses and classes that we offer here. We'll be kicking off our winter semester here in a couple weeks, and we really believe that life transformation and change happens in our groups by doing life with other people, and we would love for you to get into one of our groups. There are groups for all different seasons of life that meet on different days of the weeks at different times. We have stuff, if you're maybe asking questions of like, what's next? How do I pray? How do I grow in my faith journey? Alpha is a great course to go into. Or maybe you want something that's for men or for women. I myself am a part of Tuesday nights here with the women's group Encounter. Shout out to all the ladies that are part of Encounter. Cannot wait to get back up and started with you all here in a couple weeks. But find a group, jump in and find your community here at Kensington. Our team's going to be out there today, so stop by and talk to them. Now, also on the lobby today, there is a table for the Warming Center. We've been partnering with the Macomb County Warming Center by providing a safe and warm place for people that are experiencing homelessness to stay for a week. And we'll be doing that here again this year, the first week of February. And we need you though, okay? For this to be a success, we need people like you that can jump on board and say, I can come and help with that. You don't have to sign up to help for the whole week. There's different things for different times, but we do need a ton of volunteers to make it a success. So stop by that table after service. Now, I hope that your 2020 is off to a great start. I know it's been an adventure with all this weather, even just this morning, but this week is our first midweek of 2020, and we would love for you to come be a part of that, as you can just take some time to just focus your heart on maybe what God has for you this year, as we will hear an inspiring message and just have a really great night of worship. So I would love for you to come back and be a part of that. Now, 10:30, I have a really important thing, okay? As we are going to continue on in our service today, it's week 2 of our series, Sermon from the Seats. Now, this tends to be our fullest service, okay? And so people are still trickling in. I know this morning might be even a little later because of the roads have been a little treacherous this morning. But we actually even have an overflow room that's set up for the 10:30 service because it has been so packed. We've had so many people coming in. So here in a second, I'm going to ask you guys to stand up and say hi to each other. And we always ask you to crunch in. I know there's still some seats here today, but if you guys could help just kind of go towards the middle, that will make sure that when people are coming in, we can get them a seat. We really want to make sure everyone can get a seat here today. So without any further ado, I would ask you at this time to stand up, say hi to those who are around you, and crunch on in.
Good morning. There it is. How are ya? My name is Craig, one of the teaching pastors here at Clinton Township. So glad to be with you guys this morning. Before we go any further, and honestly into what I think is going to be one of the best parts of the whole morning, which happens next, I want to do two things with you really quick. Number one is I want to celebrate something with you, and then I want to make a request of you. Part of what I want to celebrate is what Shauna was just talking about, which is the incredible growth that we have been seeing at the Clinton Township campus over the last couple of months, including and especially how we peaked a bit at Christmas, and that will continue to rise for us. If you were here at any of our 10 Christmas services, you may not know this, although you knew the rooms were full. We had over 10,000 people walk through our doors over the Christmas holiday, which is incredible. But that is also then carried into the new year. I know today is a weird day because of the weather, so there are some open seats this morning. But how many of you were here last week? You're like, oh, he's calling out my church attendance. No, I want to make a point about last week. My family and I were here, and we could not find a seat. Like, it was so finally they did the crunch, and there was a few seats that got opened up, but it was just jam-packed. So here's the request I want to make. If it's possible for you, would you consider maybe for a season of time giving up your seat at 10:30 if this is where you're a regular and going to one of our other two services at either 8:45 or 12:15? And here's the reason I'm asking that question. There's a story in the Bible of a time when Apostle Paul was teaching, and it was a little bit like what we're experiencing here. Place was packed out. Everyone's trying to find a seat. There's this young kid. He comes in. Only seat for him is in the windowsill. I think Paul might have been a little bit long-winded, so he fell asleep, falls out the window. If you know the story, he ends up losing his life as a result of the fall. Then he gets brought back to life. Like, that's church for you. That won't be happening today. Nobody's going to hopefully die, come back to life. And here's the great news. We have no windows to fall out, but here's the bad news. Much like that story, we're also losing seats. And one of the saddest things that I have seen happen while nobody's falling out a window is that there have been a number of times in the last several months where people have pulled in, and increasingly so more recent, people have pulled into our parking lot, especially at this service, and they've gone all through the lot. And some of you maybe have had this experience, and then they've had to drive out because they couldn't find a place to park, which means they weren't able to come in here, which means they didn't get a seat, which means they didn't hear what God had for them that day. Some of you have been here for a long time. And some of you are deeply invested in what's happening. Like, Kensington is home. This is your people. This is your place. One of the things we want to make happen is that be a reality for everyone possible. And one of the great challenges that we're facing right now, like so many churches would love this challenge, is how do we create more seats and more seating? And shy of building more building, what we're going to have to do is open up more seats at our fullest service, which is 10:30. I also realize it's when our kids are meeting too, so many of you are here because of that. But if that's not a factor for you, again, I would just ask, would you consider for a season of time giving that seat up for the one who needs to be in here and not drive frustratingly through our parking lot and leave and not get what God has for them today? So if that's you and you're willing to do that, I just want to thank you in advance for it, and thank you for believing in our mission to reach the one. There's a place in a book in the Bible called Revelation that tells us that at this present moment there is something happening that while we can't see it, it is happening just in the supernatural realm. We're told that there are entire armies of angels that are singing around the throne of Jesus right now. And that there's even creatures that we don't know how to describe and we've not yet seen or realized even exist that stand around the throne of Jesus. And with voices like that, they sing, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty." Like that's happening right now. Like that's incredible, right? That's amazing. That felt good. That was awesome. Do you realize at this very moment, even though they just exited the stage, there is an army of angelic beings that are continuing to echo those words in eternity at the feet of Jesus right now. And sometimes when I hear choirs, actually, I think all the time when I hear a choir sing, it makes me think of that, and that one day we get to be there. Like we have the opportunity to stand among them at the throne of Jesus and see him. He's not just an idea. He's not just a thought. He's a person. He's real. He's the God who created everything. And one day we have this opportunity to stand in front of him and actually look at him and hear that reverb throughout all of heaven as they just sing, "Holy, holy, holy is God." I'm so thankful for moments like that and talent like that that just gives us this appetizer of what's yet to come. And the words too, like there's this line in that song that they were just singing. Your presence is home. You know how like home just has this ability, the thought of it, the place of it, the memory of it, even sometimes the smell of it has the ability to just give this calm over you. Like whenever I'm away, I don't know if you do this, when I'm traveling, I always, if I start to get homesick, all I got to do is pull out my phone, look at my 3 kids, look at my wife, and I just get transported. No matter where I'm at, I get this feeling of being home, like this peace and this comfort, right? Experiences can do it, pictures can do it, smells can do it. We even have the phrase that we use a lot, home is where the what? So the heart is, because there are just things in life that have this incredible ability to like transport us from wherever we're at to this place of comfort and peace, this feeling of home. And what that song points to is, in part, it's the direction we're going to go this morning. What the song points to is this truth that's written all throughout the scriptures, that there is no greater place of home for your heart than living in the presence of Jesus and for the purposes of Jesus. There's no greater place for your home to find, your heart to find home. And here's the thing, I know that some of you in this room, maybe you don't believe that. Maybe you're trying to figure out if that's true. Maybe that's even part of why you're here today. You're like, I'm gonna try this church thing and figure out this God thing. And I want you to know a few things. Number one, I'm glad you're here. You belong here. Because we made this place for you. I love saying that. We made this place for you because we wanted a place where you could come with questions, with doubts, with disagreements, and have the conversation, and I think is an attempt to answer the most important questions that we'll ever ask. Is there a God? Who is he and what does he want? But I would also tell you this, for all of you, God's constant invitation is the same to every one of us. I want your heart to find home with me. I want your heart to find home with me. I will be the greatest place of home your heart will ever know. Of peace, of comfort, of purpose. That's his invitation to us all. If you were here with us last week, we launched the series off, Sermon from the Seats, which if this is new to you and you're just joining us, the whole reason for this series is that we really do believe that sometimes the best messages don't come from the stage. They come from those seats. They come from the things that God is doing in your life and that you're letting God do through your life. And so we have a month of trying to tell your stories of people who are letting God do incredible things in them and through them. The same opportunity and invitation that we all have, but we want to make sure those stories are told. Because you are the church, not this stage, not just this platform, not this building, not me. You are the church. And so we want those stories told. And last week, our lead pastor, Steve Andrews, he started the whole series off, and there was this one line he gave. My wife and I were sitting over there somewhere, and when he said it was like, man, I needed to be here for that today. He said, your pain can become your platform. And I think, I don't know about you, but for me, I even had this moment last night. I was just thinking back over the last number of years, like 5 of my life. And there are some really incredible moments in the last 5 years of my life, and there are also some very painful moments in the last 5 years of my life. And it was like in that moment, God just went, hey, you need to hear this. Part of the things that still bring emotion to your eyes, to your heart, some of that pain are the very things I am lifting you above to set you on top of, that they would become the platform for how I will keep using you. And the same is true for all of us. So here's what I want to talk about today. The direction I want to go today is really the direction that song pointed us in. More specifically than just God's presence is our home and our greatest home, but that I think the greatest home for us is also not just living in his presence, but living for his purposes. So I'm very much convinced that God is here in this place. There's just this incredible promise in the Bible that where even just a couple of us are gathered for his name's sake, he hangs and dwells in that place in a very unique way. And so because of that, I just want to ask that we would know him today, that we would experience him somehow, wherever you're at on the spectrum of faith, whether you're trying to figure it out or whether you're fully convinced and fully devoted. I just want to pray that God gives us the ability to receive what he has for us today. So let me pray for you. Father in heaven, who's also here in this place, I just more than anything else for this moment right now, I want to acknowledge you as Lord God, maker and creator of all things. You are so good. You are so present to us. You are so loving to us. And what an incredible thing that you who made us would also do life with us. You don't need us, and yet you choose to love us. And you don't keep yourself distant, like in heaven somewhere and floating through the cosmos, that you meet with us, you walk with us, you commune with us. And God, you who are here in this place, we just acknowledge you and acknowledge your presence. And my request of you this morning, God, is that you would help us to hear from you. We do not need to hear from me. We all need to hear from you. So I pray that my words would be your words. And I pray that your Spirit would give an ability this morning for all of us to catch something from your mouth that enables us to walk out of here changed and different than when we came in. Thanks for the scriptures that you've given us. Help me to do justice to them as I try to make sense of them this morning. And teach them to us from this stage yourself. In Jesus' name, amen. So I want to give you a verse this morning that's going to be kind of the direction that we're going to run for the rest of the day. So if you have a Bible, go ahead and open it up towards the end to a book called James. If you don't have a Bible, if you're still trying to figure out how to navigate the pages of it, we put all the verses on screen, so no worries. James chapter 4, verse 13 says this. Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we're going to go to this city or that city and spend a full year there carrying on business and make money. Well, you don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are say the next word, would you out loud? You're a mist. You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Now, James is an interesting author in the Bible because if you don't know this, James was actually brother to Jesus. But he didn't start out as a believer in Jesus as God. He didn't start out as a follower. He thought Jesus was nuts. He thought, like many of his family, that Jesus was crazy. But when you watch your brother crucified and then resurrect from the dead, that changes what you think about his claims to be God. So James goes on to become a devoted follower of Jesus. Even one of the authors, he's martyred later on for his faith in Jesus as God of creation. And I almost wonder if, as James writes these words, your life is a mist, you don't know what's going to happen, if there isn't a certain part of him in his review of his own life that is aware that there were days earlier that he lost the opportunity to live himself in devotion to Jesus because he neglected who Jesus was and he went a different direction. And he writes these words that I think are as poignant to his own life as they are to ours. Your life is a mist. And it doesn't matter how long you live. It doesn't matter if you live 100 plus years. Here's the truth. Here's what James is trying to get us to understand. You ready? Here's 112 years of living. That's it. Here's 112 years of living. It's going to be like, come on, I'm kidding. I could hit you, Steve. I see you out there. It's my hunting buddy. I see my target. It's better than yours. My aim. So your life is a mist. It says, here's your life. It's how quick it goes. And it's over. And one of the things that the Bible teaches is true about every single one of us, regardless of where you're at in your faith journey this morning, is that we are all created to be eternal beings, which means that this life is not all there is. You have this part of you don't see called your soul that will go on far beyond this world and this realm. Matter of fact, here's what I want you to look at this rope as for the rest of this morning. This rope is eternity. It is the life that extends beyond this one. Here is your life. This part right here, that's I'll give you 85 years. Is that generous? 90. Here's your 90 years right there. This is everything else. And what James says is this part, in light of the fact that this is the rest of it, this part, it's a mist. And it vanishes so quick. And if that's true, then there's one question that I think should drive our lives like no other, and will drive our time together this morning, and it's just simply this question. What are you living your life for? Like really living your life for? Not what you've told people you're living your life for, not what people think you're living your life for. Like in the deepest parts of who you are, what matters most, what you're pursuing, what you've got to get your hands on, like what are you living your life for? And here's the follow-up question. Does it matter? Like in the scheme of eternity, whatever you're living your life for, does it really count? Does it really matter? You know how sometimes we can watch people, maybe you've been guilty of this, who get so tunnel focused on one thing maybe like tunnel focused in their career or tunnel focused in a relationship or tunnel focused in a hobby, that they neglect everything else around them, oftentimes to their own detriment. Like these are the moments where you come to somebody and you go, what were you thinking? Or maybe somebody's even had that conversation with you, like, what were you thinking? Right, where you're so tunnel focused. I saw this story recently online of somebody that did just that. California man accidentally sets apartment on fire trying to kill a spider. Some of you are like, I would burn down the neighborhood to kill a spider, all right? I feel his pain. My brother is my brother right there. Like, he burns down a whole, listen, say this with me. Ignore the spider. Just say it, come on, humor me. Ignore the spider. Because here's what I wonder. Is it possible that some of us are living our lives like that guy? Because it's so easy to go through life and have the things that we think are so important that we just have to get our hands on, that the truth is we're neglecting the larger reality of life all around us while we do. And the really frightening thing is that sometimes the spider we're trying to get our hands on, I would even suggest maybe most of the time, it's not bad stuff. We're not talking about the contrast of good versus bad here. I'm talking about, is it what God has made you for? Is it the reason he has put you here? A lot of times the spider can be very good, meaningful things, but it's a life pursuing things that's not what God has made you for and isn't supposed to be the number one thing he has put you here for. That's why one of my favorite quotes is from a guy named Francis Chan. He's an author and a pastor. This is what Chan says about life and our fears and pursuits. He says, our greatest fear should not be a failure, right? We all are familiar with that. I don't want to fail at a relationship. I don't want to fail in marriage. I don't want to fail in my career. I don't want to be found out as a poser. He says, our greatest fear should actually be success. But success in the things that don't really matter. Success in the things that don't really matter. There's a book I was turned on to recently by a woman named Bonnie Ware. She is a hospice nurse. And over the course of her career, she has sat on the edge of many beds of men and women who are getting to the end of their life. And when you're at the end of your life, you see life different. Your priorities change, your values change. There's regrets you have that you didn't have prior. And she writes this book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying, because she said time after time after time, she would hear these regrets of people that were about to leave this life. And they all seem to be one of 5 different regrets. Here they are from 5 down to the number 1. Number 5, she said, were people wishing that they had let themselves be happier. Number 4 is people wishing that they had stayed in touch with friends. Number 3 is people wishing that they had been more courageous to express their feelings. Number 2 is people wishing that they hadn't worked so hard. So, this is all the result of people that are chasing the spider. You get the idea? Like these are people that realize there were too many moments in life that I went after the spider and I burned down the house. Like I neglected the bigger reality around me. Here's the number 1 thing, though, that she said time and time again she heard in different verbiage, but all the same regret was this. People wishing that they had had the courage to live their true life and not the life that others expected of them. But what's your true life? Like, how do you know what your true life is? So there's a story that I want us to move to now for the next couple minutes in the Bible, in a book called Luke, in the 10th chapter. And there's a story of these 2 sisters that if you have a church background, you're probably familiar with. These 2 sisters, Mary and Martha. And there's this story between the 2 of them that's much that. Living your life for what others expect, only the one sister is making a choice not to live her life based on the expectations of her sister is putting on her, and in doing so, instead, chooses to live for the true reason that she exists. So Luke chapter 10, this is what we read. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him, and she had a sister called Mary. Now Mary sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was, what's the word? Say it. She was distracted, that's going to be important, by all the preparations that had to be made. So she came to him and she asked, Lord, don't you care that my sisters left me to do all this work by myself? Tell her to get up and help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, ignore the spider. You are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. And Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. So as best we can tell, reading through the Bible, this is This is a group that is a particularly close group of friends to Jesus. They appear in multiple different stories and different settings and different places throughout the Bible. And what's interesting about this situation is you have these two sisters, both of which are friends to Jesus in the presence of Jesus, and yet both whose lives are on a very different trajectory, separated by one word. What was the word? Distraction. See, for Martha, her whole life right now is distracted by everything around her life. But for Mary, her life is focused in on the one thing that gives her life. There's a story from 2000 from a guy named John Piper. He's an author and pastor, and he spoke at this big conference back in 2000 when thousands of people showed up to hear him speak. And I think I heard it maybe a year after he had given it. I was able to listen to it online. And he tells this story of these two different situations of people that ended up making this one sermon become probably one of his most famous sermons. So here's what happens. He comes walking out onto the stage, and there's thousands of people in this audience, and he just immediately, he begins this way. He says, I want to tell you something personal that I just found out from my church. 3 weeks ago, we got news at our church that a woman named Ruby Eliason and another named Laura Edwards were killed in Cameroon. Ruby Eliason is over 80 years old, been single her whole life, and is a nurse. But she poured out her life for one thing, to make Jesus Christ known among the sick and the poor in the hardest, most unreached places in the world. And then there's Laura Edwards, a medical doctor in the Twin Cities and in her retirement, who partnered up with Ruby. She was also pushing 80 and going from village to village in Cameroon. The brakes went out on their car. They went over a cliff and instantly into glory. Two women, this is what he says to the audience, in their 80s, whole life devoted to one idea, Jesus Christ magnified among the poor and the sick in the hardest places. And then he asked the audience, is that a tragedy that they went over the cliff and died? And he kind of pauses them for a moment. He says, let me read one more thing for you. And he pulls out a copy of Reader's Digest and he reads this. Bob and Penny, they took early retirement from their jobs in the Northeast 5 years ago when he was 59 and she was 51. And now they live in Punta Gorda, Florida, where they cruise on their 30-foot trawler, play softball, and will spend the rest of their days collecting shells. And then he looks at the audience and he says, that is a tragedy. Because you have these pictures of these two groups of people. Two of them, although they ended in this blaze of glory, devoted their lives to sit at the feet of Jesus and to the work of Jesus, while two others lived their lives only for this side of eternity, that their lives would be summed up by one ultimate end. They collected shells. Life is a mist. The question is, what are you living yours for? And some of you, I know, maybe even right now internally, you're disagreeing with me. And if we were to have a one-on-one conversation, we wouldn't be on the same page. You might say things to me like, hey, listen, I guess I hear what you're saying, but the bottom line is I have to work hard for retirement. Retirement matters. Nobody else is going to take care of me. Social Security won't be there anyways when I'm there, so what's the big deal? Besides, it's not bad to enjoy the things I work hard for. Or you might point to other people that live more frivolous than you and go, listen, I live much more conservative, and I give, and I do good things for other people. Or you might even try to trump the whole conversation and say, listen, everybody can't live with a Mother Teresa vow of poverty. And I would just say back to you, I'm not talking about poverty, houses, or retirement plans. I'm talking about priorities. And I would just ask you to have an honest moment with yourself at some point today as to where your heart is. And what are you living for? And is it possible that the pursuit of your life is, at this point, the trajectory is going to be about nothing more than eventually collecting seashells? Is it possible that you're living your life in such a pursuit as to get your hands on a spider, whatever that is for you, to the neglect of something far more valuable? Your soul, your purpose, and the very reason God put you on this rock. Isn't that why the Bible teaches at one point that you can gain all of this? You could get it all. Every bit of glory, every bit of fame, every bit of pleasure, every bit of money, every bit of success. You can gain the entire world. Do you know this? And what does the Bible say? You can still lose your what? Your soul. You can still lose your soul in pursuit of everything. I don't think Martha realized this. I think she will eventually. She doesn't get this yet, which is why she's doing what so many of us are doing when we're living for the wrong things. We try to get everybody else, including God, to care about what we care about. That's why she goes to Jesus and she says, hey, can you get my sister off of her lazy bum and get in here and help out? Because what I'm doing is important. Make her do what I'm doing. She's like, this matters. I need her to matter. I need her to care about it. I need you, Jesus, to care about it and make her care about it. And what does he say? No, I won't. But then he goes even farther. He says, actually, can I be honest, Martha? She's chosen the better thing. Because there's only a few things really needed. And then he even corrects himself. He says, actually, no, one. And she's chosen the better thing. Listen, this is going to sound harsh, but I want to be honest with you. Do you realize there are things that you can pray to God about that he doesn't care about? And it's not because he doesn't care about you. It's because so often what we do is what Martha is doing. We bring a spider to him and go, can you care about this? And he's like, do you realize that is taking life out of you and I want to put life in you? No, I don't care about that. I care about what Mary's learned to do, which is to sit at my feet and make life about me and make her purposes my purposes. And what I love about Mary, this wasn't a one and done situation for her. Like this genuinely was how she lived her life. In another story, an entirely different setting and situation, John chapter 12, Jesus is again with Mary and Martha, and this is what we read. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus had lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. And here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. And Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. And then Mary took up a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume, and she poured it on the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was then filled with the fragrance of the perfume. So I have a 16-year-old son. He's the oldest of my 3 kids. And at any given moment, you can guarantee that you walk into his room and there is a plethora of smell, not all of them good. And some of them are Axe body spray, and some of them are cologne. And so a couple months ago, I had run out of cologne. So I'm like, I know there's something in his room. So I go into his room, and I find his favorite, I think it's Nautica Sport. I was like, psst, psst, psst. And he comes in right in the middle of me using it. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I need a cologne. I'm out of cologne. That's my best cologne. I'm like, I just needed a cologne. That's all I did. He's like, you're going to have to buy me new cologne. So I'm getting like so mad at this point. Like he's arguing about 3 squirts of cologne. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And then he's telling me I got to buy him a whole new bottle. So not the greatest moment, but I snapped back at him and I said, I gave you life. You can give me cologne. He's like, all right, Dad, you can have my cologne, for crying out loud. Like, all right. This bottle that she pours out on the feet of Jesus is not Nautica Sport. If you keep reading through the text, the next couple of verses makes it very clear that this is a bottle worth an entire year's worth of salary. I don't know what you make in an entire year, but I'm going to bet there's not a person in the room that's got a bottle of perfume or cologne that costs that much in your house. Like this is a lot. I don't care what era you live in or what culture you're a part of. Everybody could use an extra year worth of salary, and I doubt anybody would go spend it on perfume or cologne. So listen, here's what's important. When you've got a jar of perfume that costs what you make in a year, this is more than just money. There's a story behind this. This is a jar with power. This represents influence. This represents some kind of accomplishment, success, status. And hear me, what Mary does with that is how I want to live my life. And I pray is how you want to live yours. Because she dumped every bit of it onto the feet of Jesus and offered it up to him, which is so contrary to the path that many of us are living our lives on. It's not to empty our lives out to Jesus. It's to get everything we can from him. I mean, this is an expensive jar. I had a couple years ago, a friend of mine came to me with a jar, this jar, actually. And she was a potter, and she said, this is my most prized collection. And I looked at her, I was like, it looks like you made some mistakes. So she tells me the story behind this jar. She says, when it came out of the kiln, there were some things that went wrong, and she went into all the things that went wrong, none of which I understood, so I frankly don't remember. I just remember there was a lot of details she gave me about what went wrong. And she said, and I grabbed it, and I was about to throw it away. And she said, and then I felt like God spoke to me. And she said, and I feel like God said, hey, do you see all the the flaws and the mistakes and the cracks, and you call it worthless? And she says, yeah. And he said, she felt like he was just speaking inside. She kind of hear in her heart his voice. Felt like he said to her, that's how you see yourself, but I see you as a masterpiece. And what you call a flaw and a mistake is the very imprint of my hands forming you. And so she kept this as her most prized possession, like literally became the centerpiece in her showroom. She had countless people try to buy it off of her. She constantly told them no. And years ago, when I told this church I was a part of that I was leaving to go start a church, she brought it to me and she said, God told me to give this to you so that every day that you feel like you're less than, that you feel worthless, that you battle insecurity, that you feel like a failure, I want you to look at this and remember, you are God's masterpiece. Here's why I tell you that story. We all have a jar. The jar is your life. This is your jar. And the thing is that most of us will spend our lives trying to fill it, not empty it at Jesus' feet. Trying to fill it with things like success, money, power, the right relationships, influence, the right neighborhood to live in, the right body, and we'll just keep filling it and filling it. And then there's other things that end up in this jar as well, like shame and mistakes and regret and brokenness. And what this jar ends up becoming is both what we pursue and feel defined by. And yet what I think God invites us to do with this is what Mary did with it. Is to learn to take this jar and empty it constantly, daily at the feet of Jesus. To live and sit and dwell in his presence, to make your number one pursuit to know him and to sit in his love, that you would pour yourself into his presence, that you would live for his purposes. Because here's what he does. When you pour yourself out for him, he fills you up. You keep emptying, he keeps filling. You empty, he fills. But what he fills with is himself. His love, his purposes, his priorities, his plans, his values, and ultimately then dumps out of you his legacy. When you live for Jesus being your number one priority and learn to regularly pour yourself out to him, you will end up living a legacy like no other. Which is why last verse I want to give you this morning is from the same story, but it's a different perspective of it, written by Matthew. And Matthew writes a detail that for some reason wasn't included when we read Luke's. So John pours his perfume out onto Jesus' feet. And here's the detail that Matthew includes about what Jesus said about that moment. Verse 13, chapter 26. Truly I tell you this, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Like Jesus literally sat there in that moment and said, because she did this and poured herself out for me, then everywhere her story will be told. And here we are, 2,000 years later, talking about this woman who grew up in the Middle East that we, until eternity come, will never meet, but we know part of her story. Some of us are chasing a legacy in life right now that is nothing more than trying to get our hands on a spider. But God's invitation is, if you will pour yourself out to me, stop trying to fill your jar with everything else. Pour yourself out to me. Let me fill it, and I'll teach you the legacy I made you for. We're going to watch a video this morning, again, as continuing on in this series, Sermon from the Seats, of somebody who sat in these seats. Somebody who has now passed from this life to the next life. And we're going to hear a story about how she really did do this. Like this was her life, like constantly pouring herself out for the purposes of Jesus and into the presence of Jesus. And as we watch the story, we're also going to take up our offering this morning. And I just want you to hear this as we do this. If you're new to Kensington, especially if you're new to church and just checking us out, you just need to know that this is not a part of the morning where we're trying to get anything out of you or anything from you. We have this moment and this part of a morning for one reason, because there's so many of us in this room that Jesus is our Lord, and Kensington is our church, and the world is our mission. And what we do in this moment enables us to do everything we do outside of these walls. So if that's you, then do what's appropriate in this moment. And if you're just here visiting, feel comfortable to just let that pass by. Check out your video.
Liz was a beautiful mother. She loved it. She loved children. It was her lifelong dream to have a child. She adored Micah. She prayed over him. She loved him. She spent all her time with him, loved making him laugh. Relating to children, Liz just gave her all. Liz and I met at church we were attending. At the time, I was a youth pastor, and she was looking to volunteer and help out with the youth group. She played many different instruments, and she led the worship for the teens at that time. So it was probably, 25 years ago. Somehow 20 years passed, and you realize that she became your best friend. And most of it was due to raising how many youth coming through and relating to them and getting to love them together and being a part of everyone's life, that you became more a part of each other's life. I was engaged, and we ended up breaking off the engagement. So I was heartbroken by that because I wanted to have children. And I talked for probably about 8 years about it. She's like, if I ever get to 40, we're still going to have children. Each of us can adopt our own children. We can help each other out. When she turned 40, we looked at adoption and found out it was outrageous. We talked to one of our friends who was a doctor, as she suggested doing it medically. Looked into it, and that was $3,000, much better economically. So we decided to go ahead, and both of us tried it. Liz was very unsuccessful at first. She dealt with a couple miscarriages and things like that. I, on the other hand, got Josiah. Then she got pregnant. She was due in August 2018. Everything kind of changed when we went for her mid-pregnancy scan. I went along with her and her mother. We were there, and they said, hey, I think we found something. It looks like you might have a cyst on your ovaries. We don't know what it is, but we need to look into it. We found out she had, in fact, had stage 4 stomach cancer. Around 20 weeks, she started to have to do chemo with the baby. It was one of the only chemotherapies safe for her. They had to deliver Micah early. He was born July 2nd, and he was healthy. Liz's cancer progressed, and we had decided to stay home and that she was going to do hospice in home. We wanted her to be with the boys and be with the family because she was concerned for them. She was concerned for her family. Her first and foremost thought was that everyone knew her heart for them and that everyone was right with God. She started getting sicker and sicker, so it was less time that she could spend because she became very, very weak. But she at least was at home where she could hold her baby and love on Micah. Danny came to visit Liz and I at the house.
I came in, shook hands, met everyone. There was 2 little beautiful babies there. The grandparents were there. And then Jennifer walked me down the hallway to see Elizabeth, which was her best friend. And we went right into the room, same layout as my childhood home as I used to sleep in. Same exact thing. So I sat at the foot of the bed. I introduced myself to Elizabeth. We smiled, we talked. Jennifer sat down, and we just started talking. And we talked about life and Jesus. Elizabeth was in and out of consciousness at that point. So we just kept talking, and sometimes I'd grab her foot, and we'd laugh, and we'd have these conversations. And then at one point, Jennifer said, hey, we want to talk about the memorial service that we want to do. And the minute she said that, Elizabeth sat up in bed, and she was so animated. Okay, this is what I want, and the service, I've already thought about it. I know everything, and she got so much energy. And at one point, she looks at me, and she said, listen, I don't care who does the sermon. I don't know if you're going to do the service or someone else. It doesn't matter. But I've already written my sermon, and this is what I want you to say. And she proceeded to go through her sermon, what she already written and what she wanted people to hear from her. And I didn't have anything to write down. So I'm like, oh Lord, let my memory hold these thoughts.
It was really neat because Liz was very weak. But of course, when you talk about Jesus, she became very clear-minded, very strong. She was able to share her strong faith with him and how much she loved her Lord. And it was like someone who came in that was an old friend.
When I got in my car and started driving, I thought, wow, I was really moved by Elizabeth. I think I cried most of the way home. When you see a young life, she's relatively young, late 30s, early 40s, and you see kids and you see these things, and then you watch someone navigate it so powerfully. I don't know if she knew how powerful she was in her weakest state.
The day of the funeral was really kind of a blur a little bit. Danny did the sermon. He did a beautiful job of sharing it.
I had the honor to say, this is not my message. This is actually the message that I got from Elizabeth, and I'm going to give Elizabeth's message to you today. And then I proceeded to tell the message. What I learned from her sermon was amazing, actually, because both her and her friend Jennifer were in ministry, their whole friendship, and they were in different kinds of ministry, so they connected with all different kinds of churches. And one of the passions of my heart has been unity. And the first thing that Elizabeth said to me is, make sure you tell everyone that we are to be unified in Christ. God calls us to unification in John 17. And it resonated with me because I've been thinking about that so much. And then she proceeded to say two things that I thought really changed for me. That our life is a vapor. It's this mist. That's what Scripture says. It's just this moment that is here and goes. Make sure you spend your life on the right things. And then the last part was, what are you pouring your life out for? What are you giving your life for? And she got so passionate at that point, and she said, we have to give our life for Christ. That is the only thing worth our life.
All the time I've known Liz, I've learned so much about Jesus, how to give yourself to him every day and every moment, how to make Jesus a part of everything we do and include him in our thoughts and include him in our lives and include him in our relationships. She was a very peaceful, loving person. She gave everything she had, and she'd be able to get anything done and organize anything. I hear daily how people miss her. She was a school counselor, and I still get Facebooked from students that miss her and how they were impacted by how she loved them. More than anything, I want Micah to know that his mother was a woman of God and that her desire was that he grew up to be a man of God. And not at age 20 or 30, but as a child on, that he could be a man of God.
Those kinds of lives and examples are the thing that actually have eternal value. Like, that shaped my heart. That shaped my life. I barely know Elizabeth. Still to this day, I hardly know her at all. But I can say that that moment and her faith changed me forever. And I was with her for 30 minutes of my life. And I'm different.
I always wanted to be part of the crowd because it was safe, but it's not worth it. It's so much more. It's more fun too. Plus you get what you want in the end. Hearing God say, you did what I wanted. You did what I asked.
Hey, you can clap for that. There's probably few things as painful in life as wanting to be in a relationship and it doesn't work out, having engagement and then it breaks off. And what you could do at that point is you could live the rest of your life just frustrated about that particular spider. and chasing that particular spider, but instead you've got these two women both experiencing the same kind of hurt and disappointment in life with the same opportunity to chase that one spider, and instead decided, no, I think God would have me live for something bigger than that. And it starts by living in his presence to then learn his purposes. And hey, why don't we help each other out in that journey? Like, what an incredible story. Because part of what I'm worried about is that some of you could take this whole morning and this whole idea of just living life in the presence of Jesus and think, well, listen, man, I got stuff to do, and that's all we're supposed to do, just like sit around and just read the Bible 24/7? Like, that, okay, what kind of a life is that? No. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I love about the two stories that we just read from Luke to John is that in Luke it said that Martha was distracted. I don't know if you caught it, but in John it said Martha served. Those are two very different words, but it's still, she's busy. She's doing stuff. She's active. She's not just sitting around doing nothing, but her activity now is coming out of a very different place. It's coming out of a place of having been in the presence of Jesus, making her life about Jesus, and then he guides, he directs, he says this is what it's about. Here's the danger for so many people in this world, and maybe in this room, is that here's what you're living your whole life for, right here. And not just even the whole span of your 85 years. Truthfully, most of us are putting so much of our energy right now into this little part of it we call retirement, where we'll collect our seashells. Does that make any sense whatsoever to live that way and neglect all the rest of eternity? It makes no sense. You go, well, what do we do that's for eternity? Anything that's done for Christ. That's what lasts. Well, what do I do for him? You learn that by sitting in his presence. There's this poet, his name's C.T. Studd. Like, what a name. C.T. Studd. And C.T. Studd writes this famous poem and this line that says, only what's done for Christ will last. This is what he says. Maybe you've recognized this. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. And then there's this next line, a little lesser known, but I think even more powerful. And when I'm dying, how happy I'll be if the lamp of my life has been burned out for thee. Here's the only real application I want to give you today, the to-do of the morning. I want to give you a few simple words of a prayer that I want you to take with you and pray. And maybe make a commitment every single day for the rest of this series to pray this prayer and see if God doesn't start to speak back to you as a result of it. You go, I don't know how to pray. I'm going to give you the words. It's really simple. You just speak these to him. You say, Jesus, tune my heart to your presence and tune my hands to your purposes. And see if, as you begin to pray that to him every day, if he doesn't start to speak back to you about his presence and his purposes. Wow. So good. So good. This next week, maybe even in the next 20 minutes, there's going to be a spider that's going to run across your path, and you're going to be tempted to chase it. Ignore it. Ignore it. Ignore it. There's a bigger reality that God has called you to. Do you know that one of the accusations made against the 12 disciples is one of the reasons why so many people wanted to put them to death post-Jesus? It said in the book of Acts of them, these men, these disruptors, are turning the world upside down. 12 men who then had the people around them, other men and women, who had learned to live so devoted to the presence and the purposes of Jesus that it said that just that small rebel force was literally flipping the globe upside down. So let me ask you this. What in the world could the thousands of us that call this place home do if we lived that way? If we lived with such devotion as to pour ourselves out to the presence of Jesus and for the purposes of Jesus. May we be such men and women. And I hope you will pray that prayer with me for the rest of this series every day, maybe multiple times a day. Lord, tune my heart to your presence and my hands to your purposes, and see what he begins to then fill into your vessel and into your jar. So glad that you guys are with us this morning. I hope this was a meaningful morning for you. If there's something that stirred enough that you want to process it through, or you need prayer, we have a team of people up front that's what they're here to do. So let them serve you in that way. And to all of us, just a reminder, this Wednesday is our first midweek of the new year. Do not miss it. I get the privilege of seeing the lineup and the music we've got coming and the message, and it's going to be an incredible evening, and I look forward to experiencing it with you. You are loved. Go in peace and have a great Sunday.
represent. You gotta represent.